Climate change has the greatest impact on agriculture and its dependent livelihoods. Extreme weather changes such as droughts, flood, heavy rain, and heat waves all cause significant production losses and negatively impact food security and nutrition, degrade ecosystems. Agriculture feeds the world and supports the livelihood for millions of people in rural areas. Food systems and supply chain, including production, processing, and distribution, all emit significant amounts of greenhouse gas. The agriculture sector accounted for approximately 31%, 17 billion tons of global greenhouse gas emissions as of 2019. Greenhouse gas emissions in the agricultural sector are driven by land use change, deforestation, unsustainable crop and livestock farming, as well as increasing food loss and waste. In addition, increased energy consumption in food systems have aggravated greenhouse gas emission. On the other hand, climate change is increasingly impacting agriculture, causing losses and threatening food and nutrition security. There are no one-size-fits-all solutions for countries to meet their climate ambition given the different context, economic dimension, and technological and financial gaps. But one thing in common that is critical: political commitment to combat climate change in agriculture and innovation, which will satisfy a growing demand for food under more significant resources contained by more efficient land and water use. Reducing greenhouse gas emission, using alternative energy sources, restoring soils, and rehabilitating forests. Therefore, climate action to enhance the agriculture sector's carbon neutrality and climate resilience should promote both adaptation to climate change and reduction of greenhouse gases, which requires a joint multi-sectoral approach. Many governments have established carbon-neutral goals for the agriculture sector that reflects their national agriculture strategy. The private sector has also been scaling up and accelerating its efforts to develop new technologies to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing sustainable food systems. FAO set its strategic objectives to support carbon neutrality and climate resilience in agriculture to achieve the 2030 Agenda through the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. FAO drives climate-smart agriculture, green finance investment attraction, green jobs, digital and smart farming. In addition, FAO actively engages with agri-tech startups and young leaders to promote innovation and empowerment that will create new pathways for sustainable agricultural development and sustainable food system transformation and carbon neutrality in the agriculture sector. Let us work together to achieve carbon neutrality and climate resilience in the agriculture sector. Climate change has the greatest impact on agriculture and its dependent livelihoods. Extreme weather changes such as droughts, flood, heavy rain, and heat waves all cause significant production losses and negatively impact food security and nutrition, degrade ecosystems. Agriculture feeds the world and supports the livelihood for millions of people in rural areas. Food systems and supply chain, including production, processing, and distribution, all emit significant amounts of greenhouse gas. The agriculture sector accounted for approximately 31%, 17 billion tons of global greenhouse gas emissions as of 2019. Greenhouse gas emissions in the agricultural sector are driven by land use change, deforestation, unsustainable crop and livestock farming, as well as increasing food loss and waste. In addition, increased energy consumption in food systems have aggravated greenhouse gas emission. On the other hand, climate change is increasingly impacting agriculture, causing losses and threatening food and nutrition security. There are no one-size-fits-all solutions for countries to meet their climate ambition given the different context, economic dimension, and technological and financial gaps. But one thing in common that is critical: political commitment to combat climate change in agriculture and innovation, which will satisfy a growing demand for food under more significant resources contained by more efficient land and water use. Reducing greenhouse gas emission, using alternative energy sources, restoring soils, and rehabilitating forests. Therefore, climate action to enhance the agriculture sector's carbon neutrality and climate resilience should promote both adaptation to climate change and reduction of greenhouse gases, which requires a joint multi-sectoral approach. Many governments have established carbon-neutral goals for the agriculture sector that reflects their national agriculture strategy. The private sector has also been scaling up and accelerating its efforts to develop new technologies to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing sustainable food systems. FAO set its strategic objectives to support carbon neutrality and climate resilience in agriculture to achieve the 2030 Agenda through the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. FAO drives climate-smart agriculture, green finance investment attraction, green jobs, digital and smart farming. In addition, FAO actively engages with agri-tech startups and young leaders to promote innovation and empowerment that will create new pathways for sustainable agricultural development and sustainable food system transformation and carbon neutrality in the agriculture sector. Let us work together to achieve carbon neutrality and climate resilience in the agriculture sector. Climate change has the greatest impact on agriculture and its dependent livelihoods. Extreme weather changes such as droughts, flood, heavy rain, and heat waves all cause significant production losses and negatively impact food security and nutrition, degrade ecosystems. Agriculture feeds the world and supports the livelihood for millions of people in rural areas. Food systems and supply chain, including production, processing, and distribution, all emit significant amounts of greenhouse gas. The agriculture sector accounted for approximately 31%, 17 billion tons of global greenhouse gas emissions as of 2019. Greenhouse gas emissions in the agricultural sector are driven by land use change, deforestation, unsustainable crop and livestock farming, as well as increasing food loss and waste. In addition, increased energy consumption in food systems have aggravated greenhouse gas emission. On the other hand, climate change is increasingly impacting agriculture, causing losses and threatening food and nutrition security. There are no one-size-fits-all solutions for countries to meet their climate ambition given the different context, economic dimension, and technological and financial gaps. But one thing in common that is critical: political commitment to combat climate change in agriculture and innovation, which will satisfy a growing demand for food under more significant resources contained by more efficient land and water use. Reducing greenhouse gas emission, using alternative energy sources, restoring soils, and rehabilitating forests. Therefore, climate action to enhance the agriculture sector's carbon neutrality and climate resilience should promote both adaptation to climate change and reduction of greenhouse gases, which requires a joint multi-sectoral approach. Many governments have established carbon-neutral goals for the agriculture sector that reflects their national agriculture strategy. The private sector has also been scaling up and accelerating its efforts to develop new technologies to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing sustainable food systems. FAO set its strategic objectives to support carbon neutrality and climate resilience in agriculture to achieve the 2030 Agenda through the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. FAO drives climate-smart agriculture, green finance investment attraction, green jobs, digital and smart farming. In addition, FAO actively engages with agri-tech startups and young leaders to promote innovation and empowerment that will create new pathways for sustainable agricultural development and sustainable food system transformation and carbon neutrality in the agriculture sector. Let us work together to achieve carbon neutrality and climate resilience in the agriculture sector.
잠시 후 2시부터 탄소중립 전환과 지속가능한 농식품 시스템 구축 국제 심포지엄을 시작할 예정입니다. 내빈 여러분께서는 모두 자리에 착석해 주시기 바랍니다. 원활한 행사 진행을 위해 핸드폰은 진동으로 바꿔주시기 바랍니다. Ladies and gentlemen, we will commence the International Symposium on Achieving Carbon Neutral and Sustainable Agri-Food Systems Through Building Partnership. Please take a seat, and for a smooth running of the event, please turn your mobile phones to silent mode. 오늘 행사에는 한국어와 영어 동시 통역이 제공됩니다. 자리에 놓인 리시버를 사용하시면 원하는 언어로 내용을 들어보실 수 있습니다. 한국어 청취자께서는 리시버 채널을 1번으로 설정해 주시기 바랍니다. Please use the receiver for a simultaneous interpretation, and English interpretation is available on channel 2.
Climate change has the greatest impact on agriculture and its dependent livelihoods. Extreme weather changes such as droughts, flood, heavy rain, and heat waves all cause significant production losses and negatively impact food security and nutrition, degrade ecosystems. Agriculture feeds the world and supports the livelihood for millions of people in rural areas. Food systems and supply chain, including production, processing, and distribution, all emit significant amounts of greenhouse gas. The agriculture sector accounted for approximately 31%, 17 billion tons of global greenhouse gas emissions as of 2019. Greenhouse gas emissions in the agricultural sector are driven by land use change, deforestation, unsustainable crop and livestock farming, as well as increasing food loss and waste. In addition, increased energy consumption in food systems have aggravated greenhouse gas emission. On the other hand, climate change is increasingly impacting agriculture, causing losses and threatening food and nutrition security. There are no one-size-fits-all solutions for countries to meet their climate ambition given the different context, economic dimension, and technological and financial gaps. But one thing in common that is critical: political commitment to combat climate change in agriculture and innovation, which will satisfy a growing demand for food under more significant resources contained by more efficient land and water use. Reducing greenhouse gas emission, using alternative energy sources, restoring soils, and rehabilitating forests. Therefore, climate action to enhance the agriculture sector's carbon neutrality and climate resilience should promote both adaptation to climate change and reduction of greenhouse gases, which requires a joint multi-sectoral approach. Many governments have established carbon-neutral goals for the agriculture sector that reflects their national agriculture strategy. The private sector has also been scaling up and accelerating its efforts to develop new technologies to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and enhancing sustainable food systems. FAO set its strategic objectives to support carbon neutrality and climate resilience in agriculture to achieve the 2030 Agenda through the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. FAO drives climate-smart agriculture, green finance investment attraction, green jobs, digital and smart farming. In addition, FAO actively engages with agri-tech startups and young leaders to promote innovation and empowerment that will create new pathways for sustainable agricultural development and sustainable food system transformation and carbon neutrality in the agriculture sector. Let us work together to achieve carbon neutrality and climate resilience in the agriculture sector.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and to some of you joining us online, good morning and good evening. Welcome to the International Symposium on Achieving Carbon Neutral and Sustainable Agri-Food Systems through Building Partnership. This is co-hosted by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations Partnership and Liaison Office in the Republic of Korea, also known as FAO Partnership and Liaison Office in ROK. My name is Heo Ji-young and I am your MC of the day. Before we move on, would you please lay your eyes on the program book and the banners? Well, now that we are joined together to promote carbon neutrality, every printed material here is made of sustainable paper. And also, we have prepared a gift for you. Do you spot the box on your table? It's honey produced through the urban beekeeping. Korea is currently promoting urban beekeeping as part of our effort to protect the endangered bees in this era of climate change. With that in mind, the first half of the session is about agri-food sector carbon neutral policies at home and abroad and how to carry forward. The second session covers what the businesses, finance sector, and international organizations should do and how better to work together. Without further ado, let us officially kick off this symposium with a welcome speech. Our gracious co-host, Mr. Shen-Yao Tang, the head of FAO Partnership and Liaison Office in ROK, has prepared a welcome speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a big round of applause.
Director Yang, distinguished participants, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome you all to the International Symposium on Achieving Carbon Neutral and Sustainable Agri-Food System through Building Partnership. Thank you all again for coming here and joining us for this event. I would like to take this opportunity to express my special thanks to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs of the Republic of Korea for co-hosting such an important event. I also like to welcome such a good representation from different continents and various institutions and sectors. As we are all well aware, climate change's negative impact on the agri-food sector has been most significant in various forms: increasing temperature, frequent extreme weathers, shifting agro-ecosystem boundaries, threats of pests and disease. Farmers, especially farmers in developing countries, have already been experiencing significant effects in yields, quantity, and productivity. Today, no country is immune to the effects of climate change. We need immediate action from all levels: global, regional, national, and local levels, to support the transformation of agri-food systems, including crops, livestock, forests, and related value chains, which are critical components of climate actions. We need urgent connective actions and strengthened partnerships in order to tackle these unprecedented challenges through collaboration between public and the private sectors. In order to strategically address this, FAO has set the climate change strategy, which will contribute to the global climate agenda and assist its member states in transforming agri-food systems. The strategy serves as the foundation of the FAO's new strategic framework, 2022 to 2031, which seeks to support the 2030 agenda through the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life, leaving no one behind. With strong support from the member states, including the Republic of Korea, FAO is fully committed to supporting the members in the implementation of climate change strategy with a vision of transform agri-food systems are climate resilient and adaptive to the impacts of climate change, contribute to low carbon economy while proving nutritious food for healthy diets and fuel through innovative solutions for present and future generations. On this particular occasion, I would like to emphasize a few points that will accelerate the achievements of carbon neutrality and meet the national climate response targets. First, FAO will accelerate its support on building tailored carbon policy to support countries in implement the nationally determined contributions, NDCs, and other respective targets. As policy support and technical assistance benefits all member states, FAO will strategically support the member states' carbon policy to embed the principle of low carbon and climate resilient agri-food system development so that members can benefit from technological, financial, economic, social, institutional, and policy innovation advancements. Secondly, FAO suggests the promotion of the evidence-based decision-making and open data science approach. The data on climate and natural resources and information for prevalent agri-food system in different regions will contribute to resolving climate change crisis around the globe. FAO is ready to accelerate our efforts in contributing to the achievements of the Paris Agreement and SDG 13 by promoting, sharing, and utilizing the best available data. Third, FAO will try its best to scale up the low-cost and high-impact projects, as transforming to a low-emission, climate-resilient food system is critical to improving the livelihoods of rural communities that rely on natural resources for their well-being. FAO has been closely collaborating with international financial institutions such as GCF and GEF and others. And the FAO will scale up project implementation with them together and other institutions so that the productivity, climate resilience, GHG emission reduction are ensured. Last but not the least, FAO invites more innovative partnership, including greater public and private partnership. No single entity, nor single country can overcome existing threats and achieving carbon neutrality in the agri-food sector. Striving multidisciplinary partnership and mobilizing resources, bringing institutional knowledge, and sharing technical expertise from across the country, private sector, civil society, research institutes, and universities will help to achieve carbon neutrality. In this regard, I'm very pleased to inform you that the author of the most recent FAO publication, highlighting strategic insights on investment and partnership opportunities and public policy priorities to move the carbon neutrality, will also be with us today to discuss it further. And this publication is published by FAO. Today's symposium will serve as a platform to share the best practices, challenges, lessons learned from the experience of policy development and achievement. And we'll share ideas with various partners. In conclusion, FAO will spare no efforts to ensure that sustainable discussions on how to tackle the climate crisis and build back better and greener are held. Once again, thank you all, and I wish the symposium every success. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Tang. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him another round of applause. Okay. At this time, Director Yang Ji-yeon of Agriculture Commerce Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, our gracious co-host, is going to deliver opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. I am Yang Ji-yeon, Director of MAFRA. First of all, thank you very much for joining us at this International Symposium on Achieving Carbon Neutral and Sustainable Agri-Food Systems through Building Partnership. I would like to welcome both online and offline participants. We are having this meaningful event co-organized by FAO PLO Korea and MAFRA. This is in fact the first ever event since the establishment of FAO PLO Korea in 2019. And I would like to thank all the staff at Korea Research Institute of Climate Change for their efforts to put together the symposium. Agriculture has played a pivotal role to ensure stable food production. Yet, emerging environmental issues may trigger food crisis, which can threaten the very survival of humankind. In order to overcome food crisis and to ensure sustainable development of agriculture, carbon neutrality is a critical task that should never be put aside. To achieve carbon neutrality, MAFRA has announced 2050 strategy for agricultural products last December. And the gist of our strategies include transition to a low-carbon agriculture structure, reduction of GHG emission, and improvement of efficiency in agriculture and rural energy. First and foremost, by 2050, we plan to promote data network and AI-based precision agriculture technology and expand the land for environment-friendly agriculture. Second, to reduce greenhouse gas emission. For crop cultivation, we will pursue more systematic waterway management and scientific use of fertilizers. For livestock sector, we are going to develop and promote low methane feed and encourage livestock farmers to maintain appropriate breeding density and reduce the period of raising livestock. Lastly, through energy transition in rural housing and production, as well as distribution facilities, we are going to reduce the use of fossil fuels and expand renewable energy. Through such efforts, we will improve sustainability in agricultural sector and advance that forward. Amid this background, we have invited experts at home and abroad for today's symposium in order to discuss on carbon neutrality transition in agri-food sector and how to achieve it. In particular, Professor Yu Ga-young of Kyung University, who will be talking about Korea's carbon neutrality policy, has been actively involved in soil and climate change related researches, and currently she's serving as a member of the Science and Technology Subcommittee of Carbon Neutrality Committee. And also today we are joined by CEO of Green Labs, which provides digital solutions throughout the life cycle of agriculture from production to distribution and sales, Mr. Shin Sang-hoon. The company launched several platforms, including Fun Morning and Shinsan-hai, and Mr. Shin Sang-hoon will present how to promote technology cooperation. In addition, we are also joined by speakers from the US, New Zealand, GCF, and FAO, and many other international organizations. I would like to thank once again all the speakers for taking their time out of their busy schedule to be with us today. I sincerely hope that today's symposium will deliver meaningful insight to all those who are involved in carbon neutrality sector and offer us the value to have active discussion on how to move forward. And also, I would like to sincerely hope that today's symposium will serve as an opportunity to expand our cooperation in the agri-food sector between our ministry and FAO. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Yang, for the opening remarks. Now, let us begin the symposium in earnest. Korea strives to champion carbon neutrality with the declaration of our commitment in 2020 and raising of 2030 nationally determined contributions. And accordingly, reduction target for agriculture, livestock, fisheries was revised up to 18 million ton by 2030, which is a whopping cut from 27.1% cut from 2018. And it will be down further to 15.4 million ton by 2050. So the first session is about the efforts on the government level. We'll look into the policies of the United States of America, New Zealand, and Korea. And then we're going to discuss how to carry forward. The first speaker to lead the way is distinguished Professor Charles Rice of Kansas State University. Dr. Rice teaches and studies microbial ecology and climate change impacts on agricultural and grassland ecosystems. He's going to guide us through the United States of America's strategies to the climate crisis in the agri-food sector. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Hello, I'm Dr. Chuck Rice. I'm a University Distinguished Professor at Kansas State University. I also am chair of the Board of Agriculture and Natural Resources for the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. So I was asked to address the USA's strategies to the climate crisis and the ag and food sector in the goals to achieve a carbon neutral agriculture. Just as a reminder, I'm a university professor and not a government official. So I'm going to give my perspectives on the climate policies for U.S. agriculture. So just to set the stage, U.S. agriculture contributes approximately 10% of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, which is about 0.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Within the agriculture sector, about 50% of that comes from nitrous oxide, 38% from methane, and 12% from CO2. And this is important to remember, these different greenhouse gas sources from the agriculture sector. So I guess the U.S. policy is really based on a voluntary incentive-based approach. For many of the environmental programs in agriculture in the United States, for the most part, it's a voluntary approach rather than a regulatory approach. From water quality to soil health to climate, all fit within this framework. So under the new administration, the climate programs for U.S. agriculture have been for USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, is to identify and prioritize climate risk, adaptation opportunities, and carbon benefits of existing USDA programs, and to leverage these programs to support climate smart agriculture strategies. That's what CSA stands for. Climate smart agriculture approach, just in context, pursues the triple objectives of first, sustainably increasing productivity and incomes of the producers in the agriculture sector. Secondly, to adapt to climate change that is happening. And thirdly, reduce greenhouse gas emissions where possible. So productivity income streams are for primary importance, and then adaptation and greenhouse gas emissions are secondary. So this voluntary approach includes one pillar is to strengthen education, training, and technical assistance for climate smart agricultural practices. One of the centerpieces of the USDA program that was established is the regional climate hubs, and those are shown in the lower right-hand corner. These are climate hubs that are regionalized to provide information to farmers, to land managers, on climate information, and provide some of the technical assistance needed to adopt some of these practices. In addition, the land grant system has a cooperative extension service in every single state in the United States and its territories. And the extension service provides direct and indirect assistance to farmers, either to the farmers or to consultants that work with farmers. And this is another way to provide technical assistance to the farming agriculture community. In addition to the climate hubs and the land grant system, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service and Farm Service Agency, FSA, has several programs to assist farmers and identify climate smart practices. Currently, NRCS, or Natural Resource Conservation Service, is focusing on soil health, both as a way to sequester carbon in soils and to provide climate resilience to cropping systems. Cover crops is another focus area of the NRCS, and to identify then these climate smart practices that will help farmers and the environmental community. While the focus I just mentioned was on cropping systems, there is climate smart practices in the livestock sector, looking at manure management, waste lagoons, and other practices within the livestock sector. Nitrogen as a source of nitrous oxide is not a major emphasis, although cover crops does provide some nitrogen benefits. There are many cost share programs within the USDA that will assist farmers to adopt some of these climate smart practices, and they would include the EQIP program, Environmental Incentive Program, also to cost share or the Conservation Reserve Program. This is where vulnerable lands is taken out of production and put in perennial mixes. And there's other incentives to these programs. Another pillar of the USDA policy is to quantify, track, and report the benefits of climate smart activities. These include decision support tools, and the USDA has invested heavily into Comet Farm, which is a computer program for looking at whole farm ranch carbon and greenhouse gas accounting system. It was generated out of Colorado State University, and it is used to account for greenhouse gas systems, and I'll come back to that. In addition to the education and training and the farmer assistance, USDA NIFA, or the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, funds basic agricultural research and education. Some of these strategies within the portfolio include soil health, increasing water and nutrient use efficiency of cropping systems, increasing energy efficiency of agriculture systems, and as a result, increase climate resilience and profitability. And these programs provide the basic research component to support many of the USDA agricultural program policy programs. One highlight that was just announced this year was the Partnerships for a Climate Smart Commodities Program. This is $1 billion investment. A call for proposals were sent out, and the intent was to support new and better markets for agricultural products, with the idea to implement climate smart production practices on working lands. This would include both crop, grasslands, and livestock systems. The idea behind this is that the call for proposals was for private and public groups to submit pilot projects that would create market opportunities that use climate smart practices. A second component of this program is to measure, quantify, and monitor and verify carbon and greenhouse gas benefits associated with those practices to provide innovative, cost-effective ways to measure and verify greenhouse gas benefits. And a third component of that program is to develop markets and promote the resulting climate-smart commodities. This was just recently announced. There was over 400 proposals submitted that varied anywhere from $5 million, which was the lower limit, up to $100 million over a 5-year program. The USDA U.S. policy, is to rely on the private sector to develop carbon markets and ecosystem service markets. These ecosystem service markets not only include carbon, but can include corporate sustainability goals to meet market to service those goals. Water quality and greenhouse gas benefits are included in these markets. In addition, these private sector is looking at supply chain sustainability from farm to fork, where corporate entities are making goals for sustainability and including agriculture products as part of their sustainability platform. Some of these are monetary rewards, others are just accounting for sustainability and environmental benefits. However, as a non-government official, my interaction with these private markets and the farmers in the country, they're asking for guidance on appropriate standards and metrics. Farmers are confused by the variety of programs out there and the transparency or lack of transparency on some of these programs. And so there's a lot of uptake, the barrier for uptake on these markets is the confusion out there. So my job as chair of the U.S. National Academy's Board on Ag and Natural Resources, realizing the uncertainties in soil carbon accounting, this is focused on soil carbon and the request by the private sector, both the entities, aggregating entities and farmers, they need guidance. So we have put together, been approved, we are seeking funding right now to conduct a study to examine the methods for soil carbon accounting and develop a framework to inform carbon market standards for reliable and practical measurements capable of capturing the spatial and temporal variability of soil carbon. Once we get this funded, there'll be probably, hopefully, about a 9-month effort to help provide some clarity to the private sector and help move this effort along. So to summary, then it's a voluntary incentive-based approach for U.S. policy, and again, to identify the climate risk and the benefits of existing programs, to leverage those programs for climate-smart agriculture, to develop, quantify, track, and report the benefits, and to strengthen the education and training and technical assistance effort. So with that, I look forward to the discussion later after the other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rush. At this time, let us hear about New Zealand's commitment to sustainable livestock industry. Chief Science Advisor John Rush of New Zealand's Ministry for Primary Industry will tell us all about it. Mr. Rush has extensive experience in dry stock farming and dairy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizing committee for the opportunity to present on New Zealand's commitment to a sustainable livestock industry. My name is John Roach, and I'm the Chief Departmental Science Advisor at the Ministry for Primary Industries in New Zealand. The world is facing a massive challenge. This is the amount of protein that the world will have to produce over the next 30 years to feed humankind. So to put things in perspective, that means we must produce almost as much protein in the next 30 years as we did in the last 2,000 years. And we must do this with no more land, a key attribute of previous increases in food production, and while having a smaller footprint on the environment. Now, just to introduce New Zealand relative to the Republic of Korea. So New Zealand sits in the southern hemisphere, but if we were to transfer it into the northern hemisphere, you can see that it would sit in Western Europe, with the tip of the North Island in New Zealand sitting around the same latitude as Gibraltar, and the tip of the South Island of New Zealand sitting somewhere in the Bay of Biscay. It's a long country, about 1,600 kilometers long, and approximately 270,000 square kilometers in area. Compared with the Republic of Korea, the North Island of New Zealand is approximately the same size as the Republic of Korea and sits at a similar latitude. The primary industry is incredibly important to New Zealand's economy. We have 8 export commodities that generate more than $1 billion in net export revenue in the primary sector alone. The primary sector is responsible for more than 60% of New Zealand's net export earnings usually, and in this COVID environment, far more. But what's important in these statistics is that more than 60% of the primary sector's contribution to New Zealand's economy comes from animal proteins. Another thing that's important to understand is that our ruminant animals are pasture-based. So it's very, very different to the majority of ruminant industries around the world. Our livestock are grazed outdoors all year round and provided supplements in times of feed deficit. Now, this provides for animals to express a natural behavior, so good from an animal welfare perspective, but it comes with some challenges as well, which I will speak to. We also have a beautiful environment, and tourism is, at least pre-COVID, and we're hoping post-COVID, tourism is a significant part of our economy and a significant part of the joy that we bring to the world. And I think the beauty of New Zealand was summed up exceptionally well by the former US President, Bill Clinton, where he said that every person dreams of finding an enchanted place with beautiful mountains and breathtaking coastlines, clear lakes and amazing wildlife, but most people give up on it because they've never been to New Zealand. And so the onus is on us to protect this. Now, New Zealand's primary sector, 1/3 of the New Zealand land is protected in a conservation estate, but of the remaining land, approximately 60% of it is hill and high country farming sheep, beef and deer, together with close to 2 million hectares of plantation forestry. The remaining flatland is mainly used for dairying together with arable and horticulture. Now, New Zealand farmers are innovative, adopting new practices and technologies readily and rapidly to deal with challenges that they have faced. And we have countless examples of this over the last 100 years of the development of the primary sector in New Zealand. An example of it here is shown where feed efficiency since the mid-1980s has increased dramatically, such that the amount of feed required to produce a kilogram of milk has dropped by almost 20% over the intervening period. And on the right-hand side, the amount of milk that's produced now compared with 1990 and the size of the carbon footprint. So there's a 42% lower carbon footprint associated with every kilo of milk solids, so every kilo of fat and protein produced from New Zealand dairy cows now than there was in 1990. Substantial reduction in the carbon footprint of food. But we've got our challenges too. Over the last 30 years, we have seen a very significant increase in the size of our dairy herd and an equally significant reduction in the size of our sheep flock. So we are now milking 100% more cows than we were in 1990 on 70% more land. So there's been both an increase in the number of cows that are being milked and in the stocking rate of those cows. As you'll see from these graphs, the majority of that increase and the majority of that expansion was in the South Island of New Zealand. And that has led to quite significant changes in the footprint of the dairy industry in New Zealand. So you can see on the left-hand side, the increase in the greenhouse gas footprint in carbon dioxide equivalents, GWP, from 1990 to 2018, there was a 120% increase in the amount of methane produced. Also, we've seen very significant increases in the contaminant load that our waterways face. So total nitrogen has increased in 42% of our waterways. Oxidized nitrogen increased in 35%, and conductivity measures, so a measure of total contaminant load, increased in around 67% of our waterways. Consistently, this tends to be an intensively managed grassland with a very strong correlation with the number of dairy cattle in the catchment. This slide from my colleagues at the Ministry for the Environment highlights that, you know, New Zealanders rate water degradation as the #1 issue facing New Zealand. As I've just highlighted, many New Zealand rivers are likely to be degrading. Quite a significant number of them are actually improving as well, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. I'll touch on that later. But because of that degradation of waterways, indigenous species are declining and threatened in those catchments. So action is needed, and we are committed to that action. And we're committed to that through our national strategy, which we've called Fit for a Better World. And Fit for a Better World has 3 primary aims. Firstly, we're going to increase the export earnings from the primary sector by $44 billion over the next decade, beyond what would have happened just through natural occurrences. We are also going to play our part in meeting our climate goals by reducing biogenic methane by 24 to 47% by 2050, and including a 10% reduction below 2017 levels by 2030. And also by restoring New Zealand's fresh water to a healthy state within a generation. I'll touch on that again later. And also the third part, obviously, is our people. And we want to employ more New Zealanders into our primary sector, reconnect the urban and rural sectors of New Zealand through the primary sector. So the 3 pillars of sustainability: economics, environmental, and people, we have included in our plan for a better world. And there are 5 elements to making that happen. 1, having a more regenerative mindset. You know, principles of holistic management, balance between productive and native ecosystems, diversity, respect, and connection with past and future generations. We are taking a taiao approach, and taiao is a Maori concept, putting the environment at the center of our actions. So it's a deep relationship of respect and reciprocity with the natural world, a commitment to ethical production systems, which I'll touch on, delivering outstanding products for discerning consumers around the world, and celebrating what is unique about New Zealand and everything we do, and sharing that with the world. So our key sustainability initiatives towards a sustainable livestock sector are a reduction in our greenhouse gases. So our legislation recognizes the fact that methane is different from nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide. In particular, biogenic methane is different from nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide. That biogenic methane, because it comes from recently produced carbon dioxide and is returned over a short period to carbon dioxide, doesn't need to reach net zero to have a zero climate impact. And we're yet to identify what the actual target will be, but we're committed to reducing methane to between 24 and 47% by 2050, 10% by 2030, and that will ensure that our livestock sector through methane has no impact on the climate. We are also committed to reducing nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide to net zero by 2050. In our fresh water, we have stopped degradation. We are on course to making material improvements within 5 years in all catchments, and the intention is to restore waterways to a healthy state within a generation. We have a national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity under development, as we have a national policy statement for highly productive land under development. So recognizing the importance of highly productive land and protecting that from development. There's also a proposed new legislation for labour to ensure freedom, fairness and dignity in our labour markets. And New Zealand's welfare regulations for animals are world leading. We're underpinning this with research and development. So we have 8 R&D accelerators that have been decided on in a negotiated joint agreement between industry, government, science and Māori. So a quadruple helix approach to the R&D needs of the primary sector. Now, I don't have time to talk about all of these today, but a key one is in biological emissions and our impact on the climate. We now have a single shared plan for how new technologies and practices will help us reduce biological emissions from agriculture. Because of our system of farming, because of the pasture nature of it, the focus is on methane and nitrous oxide. Carbon dioxide is only a small part of the climate issues that of our agricultural systems. And there's a shared sense of purpose, including a recognition of the importance of Indigenous knowledge and a systems level holistic way of thinking in addressing this problem. So we've got multiple avenues that we're exploring here, and we're just kicking that off with a new Centre for Climate Action and Agricultural Emissions. Just announced 6 weeks ago in our most recent budget announcement, where the government has allocated 339 million over 4 years to increase research and adoption of agriculture to reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. Then this will be through that Centre for Climate Action and Agricultural Emissions, which will be a partnership between Māori, industry and science to define and accelerate priorities, and will include a mix of new public as well as private joint venture money. We're also leading a world-first partnership between government and industry and Māori to reduce New Zealand's agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. So a way of pricing emissions from agriculture as a world first. In terms of water, we ask ourselves what could be achieved over the next 20 years as well. And when we look at the current situation, the red spots, obviously this is a heat map, the red spots are highly contaminated water catchments, amber less so, yellow less so. Again, we find that we have established measures and farmers are incorporating those, whether that is fencing waterways, planting riparian planting to reduce the amount of nitrogen that's being lost, reduce it by close to 20% with current measures, and measures that are both current and developing, we hope to reduce that by 34% and return those waterways to a clean and healthy state over that 10 to 15 to 20 year period. Likewise with phosphorus. So establish measures that will help us reduce the phosphorus load entering our waterways and developing methods likewise to return our waterways to clean and green setting. Finally, I'd just like to touch on regenerating Aotearoa. So a lot of countries around the world talk about regenerative agriculture, and we recognize the importance of a regenerative mindset, but recognize that we've got a very different system of farming to many other countries in the world. And so we have come up with this concept of regenerating Aotearoa, Aotearoa being the original Maori word name for New Zealand. And in that, we have captured a vision on improving New Zealand's landscapes, rivers, coastal and marine environments, biodiversity and natural ecosystems, improving animal welfare, and the profitability and health and well-being of humans through our actions. We have a large research and development portfolio established and increasing. And we will be talking more about this in coming months. So just to finish, I want to recognize, I just want to say that in New Zealand, we recognize the importance of animal proteins to a balanced, wholesome diet in the future. But we also recognize the need for us to protect our natural environment, and we are committed to doing so. I'd like to thank the committee again for giving me the opportunity to present, and I hope you got something from my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. The third speaker of the session 1 is Professor Yu Ga-young of Kyung University. Dr. Yu is currently a member of Science and Technology Subcommission of 2050 Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth Commission. Her area of study is soil and climate change, and she's going to talk about Republic of Korea's implementation plan for greenhouse gas reduction in the agri-food sector. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ga-young Yu, and please excuse me taking off my mask for better breath. Okay. It is my great honor to have this opportunity to give a talk in front of you today. And the title of my presentation is Republic of Korea's Implementation Plan for Greenhouse Gas Reduction in the Agri-food Sector. And the amount of greenhouse gas emission in agriculture sector in Korea is 24.7 megaton carbon dioxide equivalent. And this amount is corresponding to 3.4% of Korean national greenhouse gas emission. And these are mainly from methane emission from livestock and rice paddies and nitrous oxide emission from agricultural field. And this is the Korean carbon neutral scenario. And as you know, agriculture sector is included in the emission division. And our governmental goal is that by 2050, greenhouse gas emission from agriculture sector should be reduced by approximately 38%. And then how to achieve this reduction? To achieve this reduction, our government set up the policy and strategies. And there are 3 parts of policy directions. The first one is conversion the current agricultural structure to low carbon agricultural structure. And the second direction is reduce greenhouse gas emission, so controlling the emission sources. And the third part is related to the energy transformation. And I'm going to explain you one by one. And in regard to low carbon agricultural structure part, there are 4 main key projects. The first one is precision farming using data, network, and artificial intelligence. And the second one is eco-friendly agriculture, which is related to organic farming. And the third one is related to the soil and water management to reduce soil erosion and proper water utilization in the agriculture sector. And the fourth one is soil carbon storage. And in regard to the greenhouse gas reduction part, irrigation and fertilizer control is very important. So I think as you are very much familiar with intermittent drainage in the rice paddy, and intermittent drainage of rice paddy can reduce methane emission by approximately 26% compared to the constant flooding practice, so which is a very powerful mitigation strategy. And another important one is fertilizer control. So reduce the amount of chemical fertilizer and convert the fertilizer usage into the organic fertilizer or slow release fertilizer is also a very good practice to reduce greenhouse gas emission. And the second one is livestock and manure management. And the third one is food distribution to reduce food distribution distances. And the fourth one is related to the lifestyle, so which is related to diet improvement and reduce food waste. And the third and the fourth direction is related to the energy usage in agriculture sector. So in agricultural facilities such as greenhouse and agricultural machinery such as tractor, farmers can use electricity or renewable energy source instead of fossil fuel combustion. And community-based RE100 is also a very good approach to achieve carbon neutral in the agricultural sector. Among these many key projects, I'm going to emphasize on soil carbon storage, which Dr. Charles Rice already emphasized the importance of it. Soil carbon is considered in the LULUCF sector in greenhouse gas inventory, land use change, and forestry sector. And if we consider agricultural soil, then agriculture can have a potential to be included in the absorption and removal division, which can make agriculture sector more close to the carbon neutral. So these diagram on the left is 5 main components of carbon of terrestrial ecosystems, and soil carbon is one of the main components of carbon of terrestrial ecosystem. And the equations on the right is about equations to calculate carbon change, and especially the red box shows that how to calculate SOC, soil carbon change, using this equation. And in this equation, soil carbon content is influenced by FLU, that is land use, agriculture, forestry, or grassland. And the second part is FMG, that is tillage practice, no tillage, or conventional or conservation tillage. And FI factor, that is residue input, manure, compost, or crop residue input. So this equation emphasizes the influence of many management practices on the storage of carbon. So then, as a very short, very brief introduction, I would like to explain you why is soil carbon so important for climate change. The main reason of it is that soil carbon is the largest reservoir of global carbon cycle. The soil carbon content contained in the 3-meter depth of soil is 5 times as large as vegetation and 4 times as large as atmosphere. And due to this very huge amount, carbon in the soil can have possibility to re-enter into the atmosphere if global temperature rise or other environmental conditions change. Then, in that case, there will be a huge self-amplifying positive feedback on climate change, which can accelerate the current climate change. So in this slide, I'd like to emphasize the balanced dynamic equilibrium among atmosphere, vegetation, and soil. So as I just told you, if soil carbon is destabilized and enter back into the atmosphere, there will be a huge positive feedback, and then that will be a very dangerous condition for human beings. So in this sense, human actions to prevent this dangerous tipping point is urgently needed. And an example of the human intervention on soil carbon storage, the good example of it is 4 per mil initiative. And before I talk about 4 per mil, I will define the soil carbon sequestration. As you all know, that soil carbon sequestration is the transfer of atmospheric carbon dioxide to long-term soil reservoir, which is identical to soil carbon storage increase. And 4 per mil initiative, Soils for Food Security and Climate, was suggested by French Ministry of Agriculture in 2015 at the same time of Paris Agreement. And the main idea of 4 per mil is very simple. The idea of it is that if we can increase soil organic carbon by 0.4%, 4 per mil every year, then that amount can offset annual anthropogenic net carbon emission. That is very simple but powerful message, although scientific field does not support this idea very much. But I think this is a very good start because it has promoted sustainable soil carbon management. So Korean government have already included many conventional methods to increase soil carbon sequestration. The main principle to increase soil carbon is very simple. Increase carbon input from vegetation because plants is the first process to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So there are many management practices in increase in residue management. They are improved crop rotations and increased crop residues and cover crops, conversion to perennial grasses or legumes, manure and compost addition, no tillage and other conservation tillage, and improved grazing land management. And cover cropping was reported to increase soil carbon storage by approximately 15%. And no tillage, adopting no tillage can also increase soil carbon by approximately 10 to 20%. And grassland management can also increase soil carbon a lot. And besides from these conventional methods, I'm going to introduce you a novel method to increase soil carbon sequestration. And that is biochar application to soil, but I think all of you have already known about biochar. But let me introduce a little bit detail. Biochar application to soil technology is already included in Korean carbon neutral scenario. And biochar, as you know, is a byproduct of pyrolysis of any kind of organic matter. And biochar carbon is chemically very stable, so if we convert the residues from crop or plants, convert them to biochar and put it back into the soil, the carbon in the biochar does not decompose very fast and stay in the soil for a long time by IPCC for more than 100 years, which make this technology as a carbon negative technology. Biochar application to soil has another co-benefits such as crop yield increase or improvement of soil structure for better water holding and fertilizer use efficiency. Due to these reasons, nowadays in Korea there are several commercial products of biochar, and all of the biochars have high soil carbon sequestration potential. And to make all the stories short, as a summary, I made a carbon calculator to quantify the effect of different management strategies on soil carbon sequestration. So this is the existing carbon content in the soil. And if we convert this soil into rice paddy, for example, about 30% of carbon can be increased. And if we adopt no tillage, then another 10%. And if we apply green manure or compost, then another several number of carbon can be increased. And this kind of simple calculator will be a very good tool to persuade policymakers and farmers to adopting conventional and novel technologies to increase soil carbon. And as a supplementary slides, I would like to introduce some of the new application method, how to apply biochar in the soil, especially applicable to the orchard soils. So our laboratory decided to put 4% by weight of biochar to soil ratio, which is optimum application rate. And I put biochar in the biodegradable fabric and make it like a sausage form, and then put those biochar around the root zone in the 2 different layers. And this is the picture of the mass production of biochar, and then this is a picture of the actual application of around the tree roots. And this could be a very effective way to increase soil carbon sequestration, at the same time improve some of the soil structure. So very similar way to the carbon calculator, this biochar addition can be, the effect of biochar addition can be calculated using this carbon calculator, which can be a very useful tool for the policy making. And this is the end of my presentation today. And thank you for your listening and attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yu. Now it is time to take a deep dive into carbon neutral policies in the agri-food sector. I'd like to kindly invite the panels to the stage. And we will shortly begin once the stage is set and the panels are ready to go. So thank you for your kind understanding. Panelists and speakers, could you please come up to the stage for the discussion session? Let's get this discussion rolling. First off, let me introduce our panels. As our chair, we have Professor Kim Kwan-soo of Seoul National University. And as our panels, we have Dr. Jung Hak-kyun of Korea Rural Economic Institute, Professor An Hee-kwon of Chungnam University, and the three speakers we just met, Professor Charles Rice, Chief Advisor John Rush, and Professor Yu Ga-young. Should you have any question, then please go to our YouTube live stream and leave it on the comment section. Now, I'll hand it over to Professor Kim Kwan-soo. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big hand.
Thank you. This is Kwan-soo Kim. I'm a moderator of this session number 1, Carbon Neutral Policy in the Agri-food sector. This session number 1, as you noticed, served as a great opportunity to see the overview of the core elements for policy developments to accomplish the carbon neutrality in the area of agri-food sector and learn the major policies of the US, New Zealand, and Korea. I would like to continue the discussion with the three presenters who have participated and along with two designated discussant. First, before we proceed with the discussion, I would like to have time to hear from our designated discussant first on their reflections of the presentations. First, I would like to ask Dr. Jung Hak-kyun, who is a research director of Korea Rural Economic Institute, about the most challenging tasks and things we need to consider to address the main challenges to pursue the direction toward the carbon neutral in the agri-food sector. Please.
Thank you. My name is Hak-kyun Jung. I'm from Korea Rural Economic Institute. Thank you for your good presentations. We could get very good information from your presentation. Our Korean government declared the 2050 carbon neutral goal in 2020. There are many challenging issues in achieving the 2050 carbon neutral goal. Speakers told us about the low carbon agricultural technologies, CSA, low emission feeds, biochar, and so on. But we have many challenges in carrying out those technologies in our agricultural sector. First, if our farmers adopt low carbon agricultural technologies, they will face a decrease in yields of crops. So they do not want to adopt those technologies. Furthermore, as the yields decrease, the food security problem is issued. John Roche from New Zealand told us the same opinion. So we must achieve the carbon neutral target with the food security problem resolved. Second, if our farmers adopt low carbon agricultural technologies, they will also face an increase in production costs, so they do not want to adopt them. Third, our farmers do not recognize carbon neutral targets and agriculture as a source of greenhouse emissions well. A survey of farmers showed that 84.4% of our farmers acknowledged the necessity of greenhouse gas reduction, whereas only 42.6% recognized a carbon neutral target. Only 40% recognized agriculture as the source of greenhouse emissions. We must enhance the acceptance of green technologies, low carbon agricultural technologies. So our government should carry out some policies. For example, we can consider direct payments for low carbon agriculture. This is incentive payment in connection with the optional public purpose direct payment program to encourage the adoption of technology by farms. this is a subsidy for farming practice that reduce GHG emissions. Second, we can consider technologies development. Especially, we should consider food security. So we must develop a very efficient technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, we secure the food. So we can consider examples, energy sector's example, support for energy efficiency improvement of agricultural machinery, and non-energy sector's example, we can set microbial management techniques related to methane production in freshwater rice fields. As Ga-young Yu from Korea told us technology to promote carbon storage in agricultural land, and the support for biochar development are very, very important. And I have emphasized on the importance of education, promotion, and informatization. It is very important to provide information on the meaning and impact of the carbon neutral declaration to form a consensus. And we can provide of policy and technical information through publicity and education. And we can also establish of an integrated data management platform related to climate change response. It is very important for us to carry out policies related to boost green technologies. So our private sector and our government, public sector also together try to achieve those goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Dr. Chung, for your insightful comments. Now, I would like to give the floor to Professor Hee-kwon An from Chungnam National University, and hear from him about what would be the main priorities of Korea to accomplish the carbon neutral in the livestock industry, since you are an expert in that area, reflecting lessons learned from the advanced cases of New Zealand from the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for excellent presentations. I really enjoyed the presentations by the US and also the New Zealand. And I believe that the New Zealand does have a different condition in terms of the livestock industry from Korea. And Professor Rice of the US mentioned that the agriculture sector actually represents 10% of the GHG emission. And Professor Yu mentioned that as of 2018, agriculture represents 34% of the GHG emission in Korea. So statistics speak differently. And also for livestock, they represent about 33.3% or 2.9%, including agriculture, and livestock alone represents about 10 million ton. So if you put that in perspective, out of the domestic GHG emission, about 1.5% is responsible by the livestock and agriculture sector. But we should not believe that the agriculture and livestock should be an exception because they represent only a small portion of the GHG. Rather, every industry and sector has to be involved to achieve carbon neutrality, and developing and promoting low carbon technology is our mission that we must achieve. And by doing so, we can actually promote sustainable and environment-friendly agriculture and livestock businesses as well. And in this regard, I believe that the livestock industry should exercise various efforts to achieve carbon neutrality. So the first thing that we have to do is that, as mentioned by the speaker, we have to quantify and verify and tracking the GHG emission, especially in livestock industry. So in various stages of the livestock industry, the GHG is emitted. And therefore, we have to, first of all, develop the coefficient for the calculation of GHG in livestock. And along with that, we also have to have an inventory and the statistics for national activities. So that's why the MAFRA has conducted some survey on GHG emission in agri-food sector to develop some data. Without such data, we cannot estimate how much GHG is emitted in livestock sector and how much we need to reduce. And therefore, in order to have a clear goal, I believe that we have to have the relevant data first. And also for livestock, the GHG, it's actually 50 to 50. So 50% comes from the interactive of, and the other 50% is from the animal waste. And so this 50% is mainly from the ruminant animals. So in order to reduce this biogenic methane, we have to improve the digestion efficiency or with better feed, or we can improve the environment that the ruminant animals live. And for this, we can utilize low methane feed, and also we can develop various additives. And for this, we have conducted the various researches. So in order to establish database and also to come up with some candidate materials that can reduce the production of methane. And also we assess the impact of the methane reduction with different feeds. And also since Korea does have a grain-fed beef and cattle industry, and therefore we have a lot of grain feed, and we have to estimate how much GHG is emitted from different types of the grain feed. And also for the other 50%, it actually comes from the animal waste. And about 52 million tons of the animal waste is generated in Korea every year, and much of them is actually converted into resources and recycled. And so in order to reduce GHG, there are growing voices that we have to generate energy out of the animal waste. And about 1% of the animal waste only is converted into energy in Korea currently in the form of biogas. And therefore, I believe that we have to make some improvement in this area. So the Korean government, from year 2010, has established and promoted the biogas plant project under the leadership of MAFRA. However, the progress is pretty slow, and we have less than 10 plants being established. So if 30 tons of the wastewater is converted into energy, then it can actually reduce the GHG by 1,400 tons. So I think that this is the way forward. And as mentioned by Professor Yu, we have to think about the biochar as well. And we actually have very limited sources to develop biochar. But if we could utilize the animal waste to develop a biochar, then it can actually be an effective source. So currently, the Korean government is engaged in various researches, especially the solid waste, including the beef and rather the cattle and the chicken waste. We can develop biochar, and this will contribute to the reduction of GHG emission. It can also improve the efficiency in animal waste management. So a lot of the feed for chicken and cattle can be turned into recycled and reused, and so we can reduce the consumption, the production of the waste as well. And with that, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate your insights on these issues. And he talked about the importance of data in this area, actually. We have about 2.9 to 3.4% greenhouse gas emission responsible for agriculture. In the US, about 10%. I don't know. I mean, we need to work very hard on verifying these numbers, I guess. And half of the emission gas is responsible for livestock industry. Anyway, the data importance, this question, we can come back to this question because it is related to the second question we received in advance. We have two questions in advance. One is to Professor Rice in the US. Are you there? I would like to ask a question to Professor Chuck Rice. You have introduced to us about the importance of creating and supporting a better market for agri-food sector as a measure for carbon neutral society. We are curious about the practical examples of the most effective markets and what core elements need to be considered to create such markets. Could you give us some ideas?
Yes, thank you. So for the question, you know, there's several companies or groups that are forming these markets. I could list some names. Ecosystem Service Market Consortium is one. There are farmer organizations or ag industry organizations that are leading some carbon markets. Truterra is one from a major ag company in the US. You know, I guess, like I said in my presentation, really there's a lot of confusion out there and there's not a standard. The farmers and people are asking about the transparency. A lot of these carbon markets are asking data from farmers, and farmers in the US do not want to share their data. Even though you Google and, you know, lots of things pop up, but they are very, have high ownership and protective of their data. I think the biggest thing why we started this National Academy study was that there's, Professor Yu mentioned all these practices for carbon sequestration into soil, and I'm a big fan of that. But there's not a good quantification or verification system. And so we really need to have some clarity into making sure those producers, farmers are sequestering carbon, particularly if it has monetary value on a market. It's just like a financial institution, they want to do an audit, right? So landowner is going to have an audit of their soil carbon. That doesn't mean you have to measure every single hectare, but it does mean that you have to have, I like a 3-tiered system, some benchmark sites, and then using a model that's been verified, and then remote sense data for scaling up to make it cost effective for a carbon market. The other thing that came out partly in the discussion was that we need to identify multiple benefits. I tell my producers, you're not going to get rich off of carbon, but it's the icing on the cake. And really, if you got more soil carbon, then you're going to have more nutrients, you're going to have more water holding capacity, it's going to have more climate resilience, and then lower risk for the farmer, so it's more profitable. So I think one of your discussants mentioned the profitability, and that's why in order for a farmer to adopt some of these practices, it has to be profitable for him or her. And then you have these other benefits like water quality on top of the climate benefits. So that, I think that's really getting a strong quantification verification system and creating some sort of standards or guidelines so to help guide the industry in these markets.
and then the multiple benefits.
Thank you for your insights again, for shedding light on these issues. Well, the second question received in advance, made by Mr. Kim Sang-byung, who is an auditor of greenhouse gas verification in the Korea Management Registrar. He asked the following questions. To Dr. John Rush, I think you can help us on this. Agri-food sector has difficulties in establishing inventory for greenhouse gas emissions, as it comprises of countless farm households and small businesses. In case of government of New Zealand, how do you identify the sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and how do you measure the amount of the greenhouse gas emissions? Please take the floor. Thank you.
That's a great question, and as Professor Rice has talked about, this is complicated, and a number of your panelists have talked about this is complicated. There's a few things different about New Zealand. As you'll remember from one of my earlier slides, the vast majority of our greenhouse gas emissions come from livestock industries, because that is the vast bulk of our primary sector. And those livestock industries are based on a landscape very similar to what you see behind me. So permanent pasture type systems with very limited tillage, which means that our soil carbon is very, very high. In fact, it's among the highest in the world, certainly in productive landscapes. And so things like that we've put to the side for the moment, because to Professor Rice's point, it is very, very hard to measure, verify, and then account for through time, because there's a flux that happens. So we're predominantly dealing with biogenic methane, which is predominantly enteric, straight out of the rumen, burped out of the nostril of the cow and the bulls. Although we have a very small waste footprint as well. Very small waste footprint from the animals. We have, just like everybody else, a relatively large food waste footprint. So we're largely dealing with biogenic methane out of the animal and nitrous oxide through urine deposition on the pasture land. So using models like Professor Rice has just talked about, we can quantify that using emissions intensity values, which I know one of your panelists just mentioned as well. We know how much milk we produce in the country. We know how much meat we produce in the country. And we have reasonably well-established emissions intensity values that allows us to estimate what are the greenhouse gas footprints that come with that. We still need to do further work on that. I'm not saying we've got that absolutely right, but we've got very good estimates. But to your point about how will a government audit it, we're still working through that. In one of my slides, I mentioned a program that we've got called He Waka Eke Noa, and that is, Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand, and He Waka Eke Noa in Maori means we are all in the boat together. We are all in this together. And so it's to symbolize a partnership between industry and government to come up with a collective plan for auditing this. And the reason why I can't give you any details is industry has just put forward their proposal on how they would like that to be done. Government is currently assessing that proposal and will come back with a counter offer and an ability to somewhere meet in the middle. But we're very, very confident that we will be able to measure this either at the processor level and then reward farmers that are using mitigation technologies separately, or be able to do it at the individual farm level with audits of farm accounts in much the same way as Professor Rice talked about auditing a business. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, we all understand that those are very hard tasks, and we need to work hard on identifying those technical coefficients, which is going to be country specific, I guess, right? So it might be a very tough task. Okay, now we go back to the on-site questions or off-site questions. Well, if you have questions, please raise your hands. Okay.
Is the international symposium, so I just speak in English. So I'm Kim Jian from CRIC, the Korea Research Institute on Climate Change, and I have a question to Professor Yu Ga-young. So my question is that, first of all, it is really surprised to know that the soils plays an important role in the achieving carbon neutrality. So my question is that in terms of the policies, it is really important to minimize the greenhouse gas emissions in the distribution and the consumption stages to achieve the carbon neutrality in the agri-food sector. So my question is, so for this purpose, what kind of policies should the government develop to innovate the food system and to draw the active participation of producers and the consumers?
Okay, thank you for asking such a difficult question. Yeah, as I already showed you in my slide, governmental policy and strategies include reduce food distribution distance and support local food systems. So that kind of systems are that kind of policies already exist. But the thing is that how to activate that kind of local food system, right? So I think the main important thing is to change people's awareness towards the local food. So my idea is that if people have some kind of good experience realizing that local food is more delicious, local food is healthier, then probably people will actively find the place where to buy that kind of local food. So I think one of the options the government can do is to support opening the local food market and supporting the farmers market on weekends. That could be probably a very good option to boost up the local food system. Okay, yeah, thank you.
감사합니다.
Because of time constraint to give us, sadly, we need to end our discussion in session number 1 now on carbon neutral policies in the agri-food sector. Thank you. We're going to come back to session number 2 shortly.
Thank you for such an insightful ideas. This concludes the first session, and let us have a short break before we continue on with our second session. And for our speakers and panels for both the session 1 and session 2, please come up to the stage for a short photo session. And those who are joining us online, please turn on your camera so that you can be part of the photo session. Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you're well refreshed and ready for the second half of the session. In order to achieve carbon neutrality in agri-food sector and build a sustainable food system, it is crucial for many different stakeholders to join their hands. And that includes the governments, businesses, financial sector, and international organizations. Against the backdrop, we will talk about multidisciplinary partnership. And the first speaker to open the second session is Mr. Shin Sang-hoon, the global CEO of Green Labs. Green Labs is pioneering smart farm and driving the digital transformation in agro industry. His vision is to solve the food supply chain problems in a sustainable way. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you. As introduced, I am Shin Sang-hoon, CEO of Green Labs. I would like to briefly introduce to you my company and our mission and vision. And then I'm going to talk about some of the carbon neutrality projects that we have pursued. Green Labs is a Korean agtech unicorn company. And we are now driving the digital transformation in the agriculture industry with a vision to solve the food supply chain problems in a sustainable manner. Our flagship service or program is called Farm Morning. And about 50 to 60% of farmers in Korea visit our applications at least once a month. So with this service, we are now achieving our mission. And here you can see our mission and strategic vision. So our vision is to innovate food in a sustainable way. And under this mission, we do have the goals to pursue transformation and innovation for Korean agriculture and food industry as a whole. Here you can see some numbers and figures. So we established ourselves in 2017, and then from 2020, we have achieved some major growth. So in 2020, we launched the Farm Morning application where farmers can share the information and data. And a lot of farmers actually joined our application. And as a result, last year, our annual sales amounted to 100 million. And this year, 210 million. And what's more encouraging is that a lot of farmers in Korea, about 700,000 of them, have registered and become members of our service. As you know, we have about 1 million farmers in Korea, which means that about 70% of farmers in Korea have used our services as members. And here you can see our business areas. So from the food production to the from farm to table, throughout all life cycle, we are involved, and especially from farmers' perspective, for a better farm management, we have introduced various digital solutions, and also for distributors. Again, we have provided the various digital solutions for the digitalization of distribution process. And by doing so, we hope that we can digitalize the production distribution of agricultural products. And we are also covering the financial services as well. And recently, we have expanded ourselves to the entire world. So especially for Asia Pacific market, we have launched our services. And here you can see some main services of our company. So we have 3 major services. And the first one is, as introduced before, we provide farm morning service, which is like the Kakao Talk of farmers. So farmers, just by installing this application, they can get a lot of customized data for more efficient farm management. We also offer B2B marketplace, and which is the online wholesale market for agricultural products. And therefore, using this service, farmers can sell their products through this channel, and wholesalers and retailers or distributors, they can directly buy and purchase agricultural products from this marketplace. And last but not least, we have Smart Farm. We have spent years to develop this service. So in more than 2,000 locations, we have distributed these smart farms. And so for bare soils and the greenhouse, we have operated this smart farm. And so far, I have talked about our company. And now let me move on to the chapter 2, which is about Green Labs Earth, or the carbon project that our company is carrying out. Again, this is our vision. So we want to innovate food in a sustainable way. And our focus is on this keyword, sustainability, because carbon generated from food is pretty significant. And therefore, in order to address climate change, I believe that the production and distribution of agriculture sector must be changed and transformed. And for this, we have developed the low-carbon agricultural technologies, and we are seriously promoting these technologies and practices. So the UN, among the UN SDG, SDG number 2, which is about food security and sustainable agriculture, and also the SDG number 13, which is related with the climate change and the relevant activities. So through these 2, we are working hard to address climate change. And based on such goals, we are developing technologies to produce and distribute low carbon food. And for this, we have pursued the Green Labs Earth project. So Green Labs Earth, how and why we came up with this project in the first place. As you know, the major countries and also the businesses have declared the carbon neutrality goals by 2050, and in particular, against this background, the efforts to reduce carbon in agri-food sector has also been emphasized. And as a major agtech company in Korea, Green Labs is trying to position itself as a major player in carbon neutrality solution. And in this graph, you can see why we pursued this project. So here you see the GHG coming from food, and they actually represent about 1/4 of the global GHG emission. Yes, depending on the data, some figures are smaller than that, but I believe that consensus has already been built that the food is the major source of GHG, which represents about 1/4 of the entire GHG. And our focus is on production of food to address this issue. So how to reduce carbon in the process of producing food? This is something that we focus on, and we are developing various business models for this. And here you can see our strategic direction. So utilizing the network consisting of farmers, we are encouraging farmers' participations for carbon reduction efforts. And also together with the globally leading companies, we have engaged in various efforts to develop agricultural practices and technologies to reduce carbon emission. As I said, that we have the largest agricultural platform with the largest number of the farmers in Korea, and therefore I believe we are in a good position to provide various incentives to induce farmers' participation. So currently, together with the Cargill Agri-Purina, we have recently developed the low methane feed. So for the first time in Asia, and using this solution for agricultural products and livestock products, and on the left-hand side, you can see the certified mark of the Green Labs Earth. So if the agricultural or livestock products are produced with the low methane feed, then they can get this kind of certificate from Green Labs Earth. This is to promote the low carbon practices. And also within this year, together with the international organization, we are going to promote the verification project to track down the carbon reduction in food industry. Now I'd like to talk about what kind of partnership we are engaged in order to ensure sustainable livestock business and industries. We have provided the various carbon-related solutions. So the first project that we have pursued is with the Cargill Agri-Purina. So for the first time among Korean businesses, we conducted the POC project, and beyond the Korean market, we are targeting the Asia and global markets in order to promote and expand the ways for reducing carbon in agri-food sector, and also together with the leading food companies in Korea, and together with the famous B2C brand, we are producing like low carbon beef or low carbon milk by applying the methane reduction method. So I believe that within this year, we'll be able to distribute hundreds of millions of products. And I think that this market will grow to become hundreds of billions won worth next year. Now I'd like to talk about some innovative agriculture technologies that we have developed. So together with the APEC Center, we have signed the MOU. And utilizing the data from partners, we are pursuing ways to improve productivity and also to ensure sustainable agricultural development. And also for agriculture and livestock industries, we are building the cooperation network. And this is my last slide. So not just the livestock businesses, but in also other areas, we are engaged in the low carbon agriculture project. One of them is the smart farm or smart production management service. So we will continue to develop these technologies, and because we have developed such technologies for a long time, we can consistently apply low carbon agricultural practices and technologies to in a large scale manner. So we do have the incentives, and we can provide the technological solutions as well. So by combining IoT and farm management technologies as well as the low carbon technologies, we can ensure large-scale transformation of agricultural land to be more environment friendly and low carbon. And we are going to apply these projects to overseas markets as well to produce low carbon potatoes. So through various researches, we will continue to identify crops appropriate for different climate conditions. And also we will come up with the past and management so that we can establish a healthy green agricultural ecosystem for different localities. And here you see some outlook and future. So global food crisis will be aggravated with the climate change, and we will continue to fight and work hard to fight against this trend with the sustainable agricultural products and agricultural solutions. And by doing so, we will lead the global market and we'll continue to expand our activities. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. I believe we were all reminded of the importance of private sector in our efforts towards carbon neutrality. Our next speaker is Ms. Kunduz Maselkanova of Green Climate Fund, or the GCF. She is a senior agriculture and food security specialist at the GCF's Mitigation and Adoption Division. She'll walk us through the GCF financing of agricultural projects. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her a warm round of applause.
Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues and partners. Before I start the presentation, I would like to thank the organizers of the symposium for giving the opportunity to the Green Climate Fund to present our investments in sustainability, resilience, and carbon neutrality of agriculture and food systems. With your kind permission, I would also like to remove my mask. My presentation will consist of two sections. In the first section, I will discuss investment approaches of the GCF, our current portfolio, as well as programming for the future. In the section 2, I will discuss best practices and lessons learned. Briefly on how the GCF supports the agriculture and food systems, transition towards resilient and low-emission agriculture and food systems are supported through 3 paradigm-shifting investment pathways and across 4 major drivers of change. The investment pathways are, first one, on promoting resilient agroecology, which supports adaptation interventions to reduce impact of the climate shocks on agricultural productivity, at the same time supporting low-emission production. In the second pathway, we support mainstreaming climate considerations in agriculture management by improving the access of the countries to the climate information and as well as risk management information and data and services. In the third pathway on reconfiguration of food systems, and we support transition towards resilient and low emission food systems starting from the farm gate to consumer level. And the 4 main drivers of change are agriculture, in the agriculture and food security is transformational planning and programming, catalyzing climate innovations, mobilizing finance at scale, as well as leveraging coalitions and using knowledge to scale up such success. What our current agriculture and food system portfolio looks like. As you all may know, GCF is perhaps one of the youngest organizations. Despite that, as of now, it approved 65 agricultural projects for the value of around $1 billion, which is equivalent to 10% of our overall fund level financing of $10 billion. Our portfolio has balanced focus on mitigation and adaptation measures, and 1% of our projects are cross-cutting, which means both adaptation and mitigation, and as well, and remaining 29% is adaptation focused. On average, our project size is right now $15 million per project, which is considerably low to achieve significant delivery at scale, which I am going to discuss later on more in details. In terms of distribution of our portfolio across investment pathways, it reflects, as shown in the second diagram, priority needs of the most vulnerable countries. When I say most vulnerable, I refer to climate vulnerable as well as economic vulnerable countries. And around 56 projects focus mostly on resilient agroecology, which I explained earlier, on reducing the climate shock's impact on agricultural productivity. Around 41 projects focus on second paradigm shifting pathway, and then 30 projects have element of food systems reconfiguration. As I will discuss later on, we have some gaps among transition pathway investments. And where we do invest. So as you know, our priority focus is given to the most vulnerable countries, such as least developed countries and small island countries. And however, we have some geographic gap in region, and our focus in the future programming is to close that gap by increasing some investments in areas such as Eastern European countries. GCF is primarily a partnership-based organization, and our investments are delivered by our main partners, who are international and local accredited entities. International accredited entities, as you may know, include such in financial institutions such as World Bank and IFAD, and also specialized technical agencies such as FAO. And direct access entities include local and regional organizations. And as shown in the second slide, we do have some gap in partnering with direct access entities, which I'm going to discuss more in the next slide. In terms of the sectoral focus and financial instruments, our portfolio is currently primarily focusing on public sector investments, which again, as I mentioned earlier, because our primary support countries are most economically and climate vulnerable countries. And in the future programming, we would like to increase our projects in private sector and also increase leveraging private sector financing through application of policy de-risking measures and financial de-risking measures, among others. In terms of financial instruments, as shown in the second slide, we do have a direction towards financial de-risking measures and diversification of financial instruments, such as first loss guarantees, green bonds, and debt guarantees, which I'm going to discuss more later on. And looking into the future, we expect to maintain our current focus on all paradigm shifting and thematic areas. However, we also would like to prioritize some thematic areas in order to close the current gap, as well as in response to current and climate action priorities. Shortly, this means that in the paradigm shifting area 1 and 2, we basically expect no change. However, we would like to have more investments in sustainable and balanced diets, in low carbon livestock and methane reduction, food loss and waste, and also urban and peri-urban agriculture. And some cross-cutting areas listed here where we will continue and we will do more. So why do we prioritize 3 flagship areas, such as low carbon livestock and methane reduction, reducing food loss, and sustainable and healthy diets? I will not go too much into details because previous speakers touched upon importance of these flagship and thematic areas in terms of building the resilience, as well as reaching the carbon neutrality in agriculture and food systems. So here, that's it. So in terms of low carbon livestock, as we all know, livestock supply chain amounts to 14.5% global GHG emissions annually, but most importantly, methane from the enteric fermentation traps 84 times more heat than carbon dioxide, which is resulted in global methane pledge launched at COP26. And another crucial element is that around 430 million of the world's poor are livestock keepers. That's why it's very critical for us to support this flagship area and propose interventions and policy and financial de-risking and public finance. We also expect to focus more on programmatic approaches to deliver at scale. We hope on building on innovation and technologies and involving private sector, both in the investment delivery as well as investment financing. Similarly, food loss and waste also contributes to around 10% of the global emissions. And approximately 30% of the food produced annually are lost or wasted per year. So addressing this issue will have significant impact in terms of reducing the GHG emissions as well as freeing up productive lands and also to feed increasing global population. And most importantly, most of our supporting countries, least developed and small island countries and other developing countries, have the food loss and waste as a priority area in their nationally determined contributions. Again, similar to the first flagship area, we expect to focus on policy de-risking, public finance, financial de-risking measures. And then promoting sustainable and healthy diets. Previous speakers touched upon it. Again, it also has significant mitigation and adaptation potential and increasing food security and producing the health core benefits. And if we promote behavioral change as well as adaptation through the transition to sustainable diets, we will be able to free up significant land areas and reduce the emissions. We understand that this is one of the difficult interventions to implement. However, we also recognize that technologies and innovations in areas of food is increasing. Our colleague earlier mentioned some of them, and it's crop-based protein and lab-based animal protein sources and so on and so forth. And this is a summary of our current and future projected pipeline and portfolio. And in terms of best practices, we compiled several examples of the projects in public and private sector, which will represent different geographic areas, programmatic or versus a single country approach, as well as different sizes. The first one of the public sector example is Program for Integrated Development and Adaptation to Climate Change in the Niger Basin. The Sahelian part of the Niger Basin, as you may all know, faced significant land degradation issues in the latest decades, partly due to the human-induced practices, population growth, agricultural intensification, as well as climate-induced impacts. This program, which is supported by DCF through around $57.7 million financing, is going to have elements of carbon neutrality, including restoration of watersheds and soil and land degradation, addressing the intensification and malpractices, addressing mining concessions and climate-related factors. The second one is in Micronesia. It's a very small project because the country is very small, and it's purely grant-based because the country is very vulnerable economically as well. And it's purely adaptation project, although it has mitigation elements. In this project, our carbon neutrality interventions include restoration of the degraded soil, reforestation, low carbon livestock, reducing food loss and waste, as well as transitioning towards sustainable and healthy diets, as our colleague mentioned earlier, including promoting the locally produced food and reducing the food imports with higher emission footprint. In terms of private sector proposals, again, we do have two examples here. First one is by Acumen. It's called Acumen Resilient Agriculture Fund, and where we do have around $26 million financing, and this is the first ever private sector adaptation-focused agriculture fund, which has some elements of which promote also carbon neutrality. The second is more of co-investment platform nature. It's Global Fund for Coral Reefs investment window with 17 participating beneficiary countries across the globe. It's primarily private sector. Also, we have some elements of public sector investment, and its GCF financing is $125 million in equity. And GCF also supports first loss position and as anchor investor. In this program, our investments are expected to protect around 29,000 hectares of reef, which is equivalent to more than $10 billion per year ecosystem services with significant carbon neutral impact. And also this program focuses on creating green jobs. And the final example is on public and private sector based green recovery program. This is delivered by our partner Asian Development Bank. GCF financing is in this program $300 million, including $280 million grant loans and $20 million grant. It supports 5 Asian countries for over the 30-year period, and it's a purely mitigation project which is cross-sectoral, including energy, agriculture, and urban sector. The project aims at reducing 119 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent over lifespan of 30 years. And performance targets include that 45% of sub-projects will become green, receive the green certification and standardization, and also create around 340 or 380,000 green jobs. Carbon neutrality is going to be, in agriculture sector focused section, is going to be achieved through reforestation, mangrove plantation and management, agroforestry restoration, energy efficiency in agriculture, introducing renewable energy, soil sequestration, among others. So what are our lessons learned? So I will probably start from capacity of the countries, because we learned that investing in capacity of countries and direct access entities, which are local organizations, are very critical for developing transformational project proposals. We do support this capacity needs through readiness and project preparation facility grants, as well as grants which to strengthen the capacity for the monitoring and evaluation. We also learned that innovations in such as technologies, products, and services are driving climate action, which is our second lesson learned. The third we understood is that in order to leverage private sector financing, it is very critical to introduce financial de-risking measures which are innovative and diverse. Emission reduction capacities of countries also need strengthening, as both for reporting and also to facilitate the carbon trade, which earlier Professor Rice also mentioned. And we also learned that there is a need for diverse base of partners, both for proposing innovative solutions to climate challenges and for project development and implementation. And our last lesson to highlight is that in order to accelerate delivery at scale, we need to focus more on programmatic approaches. Here I will stop. Thank you so much for your attention. 감사합니다. And here I list my colleagues and my contact numbers. If you have any questions or suggestions, we are happy to support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maselkanova, for your speech. Next, we have two speakers to share their suggestions for multidisciplinary partnership. Mr. Samir Karki from FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and Ms. Eva Illegard-Pedersen, a value chain specialist from FAO Investment Center. Mr. Karki is currently working as a technical officer for natural resources from FAO GEF Coordination Unit under the Office of Climate, Biodiversity, and Environment. He'll start off, and then Ms. Pedersen will take over to show us some good cases of partnership between FAO and the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a big round of applause.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. As you've heard, my name is Samir Karki, and I work with the FAO GEF Coordination Unit in the Office of Climate, Biodiversity and Environment in FAO. And this presentation is going to be jointly with my colleague Eva Pedersen from the FAO's Investment Center. As you've heard this morning from our FAO representative to Korea, that FAO places very high importance on the issue of partnerships, but also on climate change. So my presentation will basically focus on how FAO is promoting partnership and focusing on climate change through its strategies, both at its global cross-cutting strategy, as well as a specific new strategy that is brought out on climate change. And Eva will give an example of a recent publication that was brought out in partnership with ERDB on the whole issue of what does climate neutrality mean and what some of the challenges are. Next, please. So FAO's overall goal is achieving food security for all and making sure people have regular access to enough high quality food to lead active, healthy lives. As you can imagine, this is not possible without addressing the severe challenges we all face from climate change. Next, please. So FAO's new strategic framework, which covers the period 2022 to 2031, places very strong emphasis on climate change as a cross-cutting area of work. Within the strategy, obviously, we have put 4 aspirations, which are better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life as our aspirations, which are supported by these 4, if you like, promoters, which you can see as innovation, etc., in the middle. Next, please. So our current strategic work plan, which covers the period 2022 to 2023, has 20 program priority areas, and they all recognize the strong need for partnerships. These are obviously interlinked areas of work. And as I mentioned earlier, climate change, although it is considered a cross-cutting area, this has been placed under better environment. And as you can see from bullet 11, climate change mitigation and adapted agri-food systems is one of our top program priority areas. And the Office of Climate, Biodiversity and Environment, where I'm working, is the primary focal unit for this. However, all our technical divisions, including the multidisciplinary team that is the Investment Center, also obviously is very important stakeholder in promoting this globally. Next one, please. FAO recently had its strategy on climate change 2022 to 2031 approved. And this strategy obviously takes the whole issue of partnership and furthering the vision of climate neutrality further. So our vision under this strategy is agri-food systems are sustainable, inclusive, resilient, and adaptive to climate change and its impacts, and contribute to low-emission economies while providing sufficient, safe, and nutritious foods for healthy diets, as well as other agricultural products and services for present and future generations leaving no one behind. So as you can imagine, this vision tries to encompass all aspects of our work, including social, environmental, and economic aspects. Next, please. Our strategy on climate change also presents a very strong framework for partnerships. It has laid out a number of guiding principles, which includes looking at the whole agri-food as a system. So basically taking a system approach, which starts from the value chains from their actors from the natural resources base to production, processing, and marketing, as well as the food environment and consumption, consumer behaviors, etc. As you can also see, the partnership issue is quite broad in our definition, because we talk about our country-driven approaches, because FAO is a membership-based organization where most of our members are nations. So we are driven by their priorities and the demand. But it will also put the farmers, livestock keepers, fishers, aquaculturists, and forest-dependent people, also focusing on women, youth, indigenous people, as well as delivering through strategic partnerships with a whole range of partners. And I will describe some examples later on. We absolutely see the value and importance of multi-stakeholder approaches in delivery of not just the climate strategy, but our overall strategy. Next, please. Here are some examples of diverse partnerships that we have on climate change. As I already mentioned, FAO has 195 members, most of which are countries and the European Union. And we actually have presence in at least 130 countries worldwide. We also have several types of partnerships, such as South-South cooperation, where we promote learning and sharing between nations. We also work very closely with our wider UN family. For example, FAO is currently hosting the Food System Coordination Hub and collaborates with and draws upon the wider UN system for follow-up to the Food System Summit that was hosted by the Secretary General of the United Nations. We work also very closely with the private sector, civil societies, other technical agencies, and academia. And we also work very closely with international finance institutions, particularly through FAO's Investment Center. And Eva will give an example from our work with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And Jacopo Manzoni, who is also one of the co-authors of this report that Eva will be talking about, is also present with us today. We are also very happy to be a strong partner with the Global Environment Facility and the Green Climate Fund. Next. Here's some further examples and some details on the kind of partnership we have. For example, we do a lot of work on developing strategies with different kind of partners. For example, with the Global Dairy Platform, we help to develop a sustainable livestock partnership to promote joint advocacy and awareness, raising knowledge and data sharing. With the GEF, we obviously work a lot on design and implementation projects at local, national, regional, and global levels. And I will give an example of a big programmatic approach that is on Sustainable Drylands Program and also the Food Systems, Land Use, and Restoration Program, which is led by the World Bank, but FAO is a key partner in that program. And as mentioned earlier, Eva and Jacopo will be talking about our partnership with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Next, please. So this partnership with the GEF in its seventh cycle of funding under two impact programs, one on the dryland sustainable landscapes, and the second one on food systems, land use, and restoration programs, are in a way flagship programs under which we're trying to achieve not just carbon neutral, but also more environmentally sustainable food systems widely, agri-food systems. These programs aim to, like Kunduz was mentioning earlier, we do recognize, and Jeff also recognizes, that you need more programmatic approach to have the scale and impact that is needed in order to turn the tide on both climate change and also nature loss and degradation. The Drylands program is led by FAO, and has a number of countries involved. And the food systems program, although led by the World Bank, we are actually managing around 12 of the 27 child projects. Now, these programs build on partnerships with the countries as well as local communities, the private sector, research organizations, and also need, obviously, all of these programs are very intersectoral as well as multi-stakeholder in nature. Next, please. Now I will pass on the presentation to Eva.
Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. My name is Eva Ellegard Peterson, and I'm an economist working for the FAO Investment Center in Rome. So today I will briefly talk to you about some of the work that the Investment Center does on carbon neutrality, specifically in partnership with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, so EBRD. So the Investment Center and the EBRD have a long-standing partnership in mobilizing public and private stakeholders towards more environmentally sustainable agri-food systems in EBRD's countries of operation. And one of the major outcomes from this collaboration is a report on investing in carbon neutrality in the agri-food sector. This report was officially published on June 22nd, 2022, and it is a culmination of the work done by the FAO EBRD team, as well as other FAO and non-FAO specialists. So the report presents a comprehensive assessment of some of the major challenges and opportunities in achieving carbon neutrality in the agri-food sector. It also highlights some of the strategic actions required to support investment and public policy development, and provides key recommendations for the development partners in moving the carbon neutrality agenda forward. And now I will delve into some of the major aspects and findings of the report. Next slide, please. Yes, so first of all, the report explores some of the main drivers for decarbonization from a private sector point of view. And some of these main drivers for decarbonization for companies include achieving resilience and increasing efficiencies, anticipating and complying to policy shifts and regulations, responding to evolving investor expectations, and finally, leveraging new market opportunities and building brand loyalty and reputation. So as you can see in the figure to the right, the trade-offs between the risks and opportunities associated to these drivers will condition the carbon neutrality pathways adopted by companies. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the drivers, along with the multiple options to achieve carbon neutrality, have led to uneven levels of adoption by the private sector. So the uneven levels of adoption to achieve carbon neutrality are especially driven by the fact that carbon neutrality is largely a voluntary process. So the voluntary nature has led companies to decide on how much of their emissions are offset or directly reduced, how their emissions are targeted in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and in terms of organizational scope. So whether a company goes to decarbonize a product line, or whether the whole company is targeted in terms of achieving carbon neutrality. And finally, also companies can decide basically on their emission baselines, offsets and reductions, and how these are validated, and whether third-party certifications are used in validating these things. Importantly, the proliferation of labels and weak governance has also led to uneven adoption rates, especially in terms of communicating carbon neutrality efforts. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the uneven adoption rates are also underpinned by a series of challenges, and these challenges include the fact that achieving carbon neutrality can present significant costs, especially for smaller companies and players, and also across emission-intensive sectors. Agribusinesses are also challenged by a lack of reliable data to develop life cycle assessments, poor governance, and a proliferation of standards. Smaller players in value chains also often have limited access to decarbonization technologies and for the financing to invest in these. Importantly, the proliferation of labels challenge consumers in actually understanding and valuing carbon and in comparing emission intensities across products. Lastly, a proliferation of rating agencies and inconsistent disclosure requirements make it challenging to price risks and to attract capital to decarbonize. Next slide, please. So in light of these challenges mentioned, the report outlines 5 strategic action areas which should be focused upon to support decarbonization in agri-food systems. Under each area, partnerships should be leveraged to support decarbonization. So in the first action area, in strategically targeting carbon neutrality, partnerships between governments, companies should be formed in developing strategies, roadmaps, and targets. And here, governments can especially play a crucial role in setting the tone for strategy development and in supporting target setting processes of sectoral roadmaps developed by the private sector. Equally as important, government strategies and targets need to be endorsed by the private sector. In the second action area, so in improving tools and methods, partnerships between governments, international organizations, academia, and companies should be leveraged to improve and standardize monitoring, reporting, and verification, or MRV, tools and approaches. Now, moving to the third action area, so on governance. So governance needs to be standardized, and governments and companies should work with one another to align on agreed upon internationally recognized standards to use. In the fourth action area, indirectly supporting decarbonization, IFIs, governments, and companies need to work together to subsidize reductions and offsetting, as well as improving access to finance. Finally, in the last action area, IFIs, technical agencies, and governments need to collaboratively raise awareness, disseminate best practices, and fund research efforts. So in this regard, FAO is collaborating with IFIs and governments to deliver technical assistance and policy advice in decarbonizing the agri-food sector. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in summary, FAO is an organization, as an organization, and its governance provides a sound example of global partnerships between countries. FAO's strategic framework and its strategy on climate change strongly emphasizes the use or leveraging of partnerships. Importantly, overcoming challenges of achieving carbon neutrality will require partnerships between a range of actors. And finally, FAO exemplifies the strength of using partnerships in the decarbonization agenda by collaborating with IFIs and the public sector to deliver TA policy and TA tools and policy advice. And thank you. That is it from my side. Oh, here are.
Thank you, Mr. Karki, Ms. Pedersen. Just as FAO envisions, I believe no one will be left behind if the global community continues on with our efforts. Now we'll move on to discussion on multidisciplinary partnership for carbon neutrality in agri-food sector. I'd like to kindly invite our panels onto the stage. We'll shortly resume as soon as everything gets settled. So thank you for your patience and kind understanding. Panels, please come up to the stage. Are you all ready for the discussion? I believe you're all eager to learn more about how better to partner up and promote carbon neutrality. Professor Kim Kwan-soo of Seoul National University will continue to serve as our chair. And as our panels, we have Mr. Shonda Clean, the head of Food System Initiative and the member of the Executive Committee at the World Economic Forum, Professor Paulo Limo from Sokoine University of Agriculture, Tanzania. And the four speakers we just met, Mr. Shin Sang-hoon, the CEO of Green Labs, Ms. Kunduz Masilkanova from GCF, Mr. Samir Karki from FAO, Ms. Eva Pedersen from FAO. So same as the first session, please comment on our YouTube live stream and should you have any questions. Now I'll hand it over to Professor Kim Kwan-soo. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big hand.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm very honored to serve as the moderator of this session number 2, again, under the theme of sectoral efforts for carbon neutrality in agri-food sector. In this session, presentations, as you see, have been made regarding the important role of multilateral cooperation in order to accomplish the carbon neutrality in this sector. We have two designated discussants. First, before we proceed with the discussion, I would like to ask a question to our first discussant, who is head of the Future of Food, Sean DeClini, from the World Economic Forum. I understand that the public-private cooperation has been an essential issue of World Economic Forum. Along this line, I would like to learn from you on how the public-private partnership can contribute to achieving carbon neutrality, and what would be the most innovative and ideal type of public-private partnerships to accomplish this goal. Please.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. I think this is probably one of the most pressing issues of our time, and made even more challenging in the context of food crisis that we're in at the moment. How do you balance out the short-term needs for people to avoid hunger, while at the same time managing the other critical pressing challenge of today, which is the climate crisis, and to achieve climate neutrality. And I think what is absolutely clear, and what has been shown over recent years, is that there is no way that any one sector or one initiative or one institution can do this on its own. It's going to require an unprecedented effort as the world adopts and food systems adopt to a series of shocks to the systems, as we're seeing as a result of the war in the Ukraine and a number of key weather-related events around the world, whether they're droughts in the Horn of Africa, or in Africa, you're seeing floods in South Africa, together with locust plagues, and so you're just seeing this constant series of shocks that are impacting continually on the food system. And this will require governments, civil society, and private sector to work together much more innovatively, and to really look at how do you move beyond a partnership model. So how do we just move beyond individual partnerships to bringing a lot of those cross-sector partnerships together to create real momentum for change? And so what do those inclusive, at-scale partnerships models look like if they're going to really create a tipping point around carbon neutrality? And so at the World Economic Forum, we've been working on an initiative like 100 million farmers. What would it take to bring 100 million farms and 100 million farmers to the point that you can have net zero, nature positive, and resilient agricultural systems, representing maybe 10 or 20% as a tipping point? What would it require in rapid succession to achieve a tipping point scenario of maybe 20% of all farms in the world adopting that strategy? And that will require us to look at the partnership models, the innovation, the financing models, the capacity building that will enable this change.
Thank you for your insights, Mr. Kline. I understand that you have to leave earlier, so take your time. Next, I would like to ask our second discussant, lecturer Dr. Paolo John Limino. Please explain shortly about agri-food sector's carbon neutral strategy in Tanzania, your country, as one of the most active countries on putting efforts to achieve carbon neutrality in an African region. Also, we are curious about what type of partnership is needed in order to implement the strategies more effectively in your country. Thank you.
Sokoine University of Agriculture and the National Carbon Monitoring Center. This is located in Tanzania, East Africa. So in Tanzania, actually we have a partnership, private partnership, and SAGOT, Southern Agricultural Growth Corridor, which was established in 2010 during the World Economic Forum Summit, which was held in Dar es Salaam. And if you go through the agricultural growth corridor of Tanzania, you can see that most farmers are in groups in terms of association. And for instance, the Water Users Association, where they tend to, first of all, they are prioritized in terms of the services water, to utilize the water for agricultural activities. But also they are receiving the other extension services, those farmers who are in their associations. But also other initiatives like education, the conservation, tillages, they are normally receiving the education programs, sometimes outreach, learning from other good or best practices around East Africa. We have some cases. But also as a nation, we have the several police and legal structures. We have strategies. However, we don't have the very specific strategy on carbon neutral, of which through this symposium, I have to take this message home that we just need to have a strategy. Like here in Korea, the 2050 carbon zero strategy. So I hope also until the end of this year, maybe we'll have a draft which will be very specific in the carbon neutral target. So we have a number of good policies related to climate change, smart agriculture in the country. We have the RED strategy, we have the NAPA, the National Adaptation Program of 2011, but also and other many very specific strategies. But also through our center, the National Carbon Monitoring Center, where I'm from, we are trying to work hard on how we can manage ourselves as a country to establish, to develop to the greenhouse gases inventory. So we have a project and the National Carbon Monitoring Center coordinator, Professor Zahabu, who is doing a very good work to mobilize all experts all over the country and developing methodology where we are using the guideline, meaning the greenhouse gases guideline of 2019, the revised version, to see how, as a country, we can manage using our local expertise to estimate the greenhouse gases through all sector. And so far, we have conducted several capacity building to expert, and the team is ready through the National Greenhouse Gases Project and NCMC. So then later on, we are going to establish the emission baseline ourselves using the local expertise. And then after, since we have several small projects in the country, which are aiming at reducing greenhouse gases emission. So after sometimes we can manage to assess whether these projects are really contributing to the reduction of greenhouse gases or not. So in general and in a nutshell, but is that way. We have several small projects which are aiming at reducing greenhouse gases in the country. But as a country, I see we need to come up with a national carbon neutral strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your detailed explanations on what's going on in your country. I think you made a good point, for this international symposium. We can actually learn from you, and you can learn from us in every aspect. Okay, now let us continue our discussion with pre-registered questions. First one is to Ms. Kunduz Markanova, a specialist of GCF. Could you kindly tell us about how the announcement of carbon neutrality by nations since 2020 has affected the composition of recent portfolios in the Agri-food project in GCF?
Thank you so much for this excellent question. So, short answer will be that there is no significant change in our composition, and it's not because the Global Green Climate Fund is not responsive to the 2020 pledge, but because the Green Climate Fund, which is the largest climate fund, is created in such a way that carbon neutrality is one of its core elements of its business model. However, we have to mention that the 2020 pledges in some way accelerated demand, especially for private sector projects. As you all know, after the 2020 pledges, some major markets such as EU, US, and others introduced some regulations, especially on deforestation-free commodities, on commodities produced illegally. And in response, we see that we have more demand from the private sector companies who would like to become more greener and get included into green platform, some demand for the investments. This is a very short answer, but one of our work or examples will be the deforestation-free commodity supporting program, which I briefly mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope that GCF is going to play an important role in the future in this context. Well, secondly, I'd like to ask a question to Ms. Ava Patterson. From your point of view as an expert from FA or investment center, what kind of major changes are necessary to achieve investment for carbon neutrality and sustainable rural development? please.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for your question. So one major change involves the standardization of data collection and estimation efforts in developing baselines and in measuring emission reductions. And this should also be complemented by standardized approaches for monitoring, reporting, and verification, so MRV. And these are especially crucial in the development of centralized and decentralized carbon neutrality policies and strategies. A second major change, which is needed, is an improvement on the governance, right? So governance needs to be improved to orient decarbonization investments and communication efforts. And here, governments have a crucial role to play in establishing clear guidelines on how to achieve carbon neutrality based on agreed upon international standards. And improved governance can also help streamline climate-related disclosure practices, thereby helping agribusinesses to actually adequately actually price risks and attract capital. Another change, or another, I would say rather, action area is that IFIs and governments may or have to subsidize MRV efforts and emission reductions through, for instance, concessional financing and subsidies. Especially for smaller players and when carbon-related externalities are not correctly priced. And this is especially required to address Scope 3 emissions and to inclusively target and involve a wider range of value chain actors. So as mentioned, especially applicable when to reach smallholder farmers. And importantly, de-risking solutions should be tailored to reduce transaction costs associated with Scope 3 emissions. So these are broadly some of the major changes which we believe need to happen to spur investment in carbon neutrality.
Thank you very much for your detailed explanations. Now, this is the last pre-registered question made by Park Yeonju, who is the CEO of Choroland, regarding the role of private sector. This question is addressed to Mr. Shin Sang-hoon, a CEO of Green Labs. She asked the following questions. In what kind of areas can the agriculture startups cooperate to contribute to the carbon neutrality in the agricultural area?
So let me answer in Korean. Can I?
지금 저희가 하고 있는 그 활동은
So what we are doing currently right now is involves the entire production and distribution process of agricultural products and food. So we aim to record and monitor the entire process and also link the data with the verification agencies in order to verify and prove that the products are truly low carbon. So we try to establish such ecosystem. You may say that this is too idle. So in order to achieve our vision, I believe what's critical is that the private sector should have the more demand for environment-friendly food. Without such demand, the production parties, they will just rely on BAU and conventional methods, and they will be reluctant to adopt new innovative methods. There is no reason for them to do so, and therefore, what we are focusing on is that farmers, we are trying to educate farmers about why they have to adopt low carbon practices. So the first thing that we do this year is that we developed the low methane feed together with the Cargill, and we are promoting this product among farmers. And this feed is about 10% more expensive than conventional feed, or sometimes 15% more expensive. And that's why farmers should have some clear reasons to adopt these new innovative products. Otherwise, they will not use this feed So unless the beef or the cattle raised with this expensive feed is sold at higher price, there is no reason for farmers to adopt this kind of new feed product. And therefore, what we are trying to is that these low-carbon beef could be sold at higher price. So we are trying to establish an ecosystem to enable that. And so we are trying to establish an ecosystem where these low-carbon products can be better positioned and sold at higher prices to final consumers. And we are creating the market for that. Unfortunately, there are many conscious companies with the environment first mindset, and they believe that these kind of products will be loved by consumers. And so with their support, we were able to launch this project with great success. And I believe that this experiment is very meaningful and important. Why? Because a lot of brands are paying attention to how this project will be unfolded. So if this project goes successful, then I believe that this kind of practices can be spread to other areas as well. And our next project is to produce low-carbon milk and also produce various types of the low-carbon dairy products. So this will be our future second project. But that's again based on the success of the first project. In other words, the first project that we are currently pursuing should be ended with success. Then we will be able to have the second project as well.
Talking about talked about the importance of the demand side of our story. I mean, consumption may lead how product can made. I think that's a very good point. Well, now let's move to the floor. If you have questions, please raise your hands. I think we can have one question from the floor. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the insightful presentation today. My name is Paul Song. I'm working with Pyongyang University Science Technology, North Korea. I'm Korean-British. I'm from South Korea, but I'm working with North Korea. I got a question for Ms. Maskanova. I do understand there's a lot of hurdle for investment in North Korea, but this is kind of a humanitarian project we can think of. So I'm currently heading International Cooperation Division with the PUST. So I'm wondering if Green or GCF have proactively considering any investment into carbon neutral and sustainable agriculture food system. For instance, there's livestock complex newly built in Gangwon province, so-called Sepodungpan. So maybe we can think of mutually beneficial and then carbon neutral project. So if we have this kind of project, will you be interested in investing in North Korea proactively, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much for this excellent question. So at GCF, country ownership is the main investment criteria. So the demand has to originate from the country and reflect the country needs and priorities. Having said that, Green Climate Fund supports investments which are targeting strengthening the resilience and low emission agriculture and food systems. From that sense, humanitarian support is a little bit outside of our investment focus. However, if there is country ownership and the nationally designated authority of each country comes with a request for support, we will consider. And as long as the proposal is aligned with key investment criteria and our strategic priorities, there will be no further issues. Hope I answered your question, but if you would like to have further discussions, please feel free to contact us bilaterally.
Thank you. We have one final question from offline to Mr. Sean Claney. Are you still here? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. What would be the best approach for innovation? That was the question. Please.
I think for carbon neutrality, innovation will be absolutely critical. I think in the food and agriculture sector, this will literally buy us time to manage the climate crisis. I think there are innovation in other sectors that are coming potentially to draw down carbon, but really food and land use is the only sector at the moment where we can actually draw down significant amounts of carbon. And so actually move from not just reducing carbon, but actually to carbon positivity. And so how do we unlock that innovation? And I think there are three different aspects to that. I mean, one, and we're seeing it today in the speech from Green Labs, is really that focused business model innovation. What's it going to require? What are those partnerships between government and business? At the moment, the food and agriculture sector has 10 times less investment than the health sector into innovation, even though the health sector is about the same size. So it shows you the potential for innovation. I think the other thing that came up today in terms of innovation is around data. Data will be absolutely critical in unlocking the road towards carbon neutrality. I think Eva Peterson, the speaker from the FAO today, talked about ERVs and or MRV, sorry, monitoring, reporting, and verification systems, and actually unlocking that data and potentially at scale. So using geospatial data will be absolutely critical. And so out of the UN Food Systems Summit last year, actually an alliance has been formed between the World Bank, the FAO, CGIAR, and the World Economic Forum to create a digital data alliance to really try and unlock that data and look at how do we better share data across the public and private sectors to unlock this. And this will be key to link that to innovative financing models and de-risking models, because we need to come up with a way of taking satellite data and transferring this down to the smallholder farmer. So in Kenya, and places like Kenya and Tanzania, this is exactly what they're trying to do, is to look at how do you take that large-scale data that's coming in from, say, satellites, and then take that all the way down that can add into being an insurance product or a financing product for farmers that helps them de-risk the crop in a way that can be much more carbon neutral. And then finally, I think it was also talked about the fact around governance and around standards. Because for how do we get the right kind, how do we get the innovation and in a way that's the right kind of innovation, not just a proliferation of as many innovations as possible, but actually building the right kind of innovation. And I think the CEO from Green Labs talked about ecosystems, and actually a lot of countries now are really trying to build national ecosystems to promote innovation. We see Vietnam launching a food innovation hub, for example, and other countries like Colombia and in Europe and in Kenya, similarly looking at how would they launch a national food innovation hub that will promote and accelerate green growth. And so how do you build that ecosystem at a country level that supports and builds the capacity in the policy environment and the investment environment that scales up the kinds of innovations we need, but that we take a broader view of innovation that's much more inclusive as well, and is not just about crowding in investment, but is actually about tapping into the strengths of the country's traditional and national existing innovations and really bringing them to the fore. So it's taking a comprehensive view of innovation, I think, is going to be very important.
For your insights, You talked about both micro and macro level innovation strategies. Well, finally, and lastly, I'd like to ask a question to Dr. Paolo John Limo, since you are here physically. We would like to ask you about how to motivate the participant of small-scale family farm household on achieving carbon neutrality in your country.
Thank you very much once again for this opportunity. Actually, currently, we don't have real motivation schemes, because so far, as I mentioned earlier, that farmers who are working in terms of association, and one of a very good example in our country, we have Water Users Association, where farmers, they tend to register themselves in groups for accessing water resources. So normally, those farmers in the groups, they are normally prioritized to access water resources under this case. But I see like we just need to have really motivation schemes in order as why farmers should go for practices with low or no carbon emission practices. We need to have such kind of motivation schemes. Like also, let me use this opportunity also to, because here I've realized that there are best practices, good, which we can adopt in our case. And also I see they can be adopted in other countries. So let us try to see how can we mainstream these best practices using a very good way. Because, for instance, this one is an international symposium. We can think about having international carbon neutral network so that the materials from other best practices can flow towards other countries. And this can be through having the focal points, existing focal points in each country, with the focus of carbon neutral target. Then most of these best practices can be easily adopted in the local context using very limited resources. There is no need to develop a new innovation or new technology which is the existing in other countries, but rather it's just to adopt it for the betterment of a given local country. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for your insights. We need to be more smarter and greener towards a better society, right? Well, since time is up already, now we are going to end the session number 2 of sectoral efforts for carbon neutrality in agri-food sector. I hope that this symposium would help us guide through our way of producing and consuming agri-food products towards carbon neutral society. Thank you so much for presenters and discussants. And also, thank you for your audiences from both on-site and off-site. Thank you so much.
This concludes today's International Symposium on Achieving Carbon Neutral and Sustainable Agri-Food Systems through Building Partnership. On behalf of our hosts, I'd like to thank everyone involved, especially the audience and the panels and speakers for your time. Thank you.